We would like to thank our visionary sponsors. Agnico Eagle. Agnico Eagle is a senior Canadian gold miner that has been producing precious metals since 1957. Agnico strives to contribute to the prosperity of its people, their families, and the communities where they operate at all times. Thank you to Agnico Eagle for hosting tonight's VIP reception. And Hatch. Hatch partners with their clients to tackle their toughest challenges in the metals, energy, and infrastructure sectors. They're celebrating 65 years of exceptional customer service this year. Thank you to Hatch for tonight's dinner wine.
The start of a new decade. A new decade to look forward to, but they tell me that hindsight is really in for 2020. Did I mention I'm new? Okay, so with that in mind, a quick look back on 2019, the year that was. The year started, of course, with issuers still stressed out and pining for when capital flows would come back into the sector. It seemed the hot money was going everywhere except into mining stocks. The situation was so dire that some companies with producing assets actually resorted to repositioning those assets in the marketplace. You gotta do what you gotta do. Of course, M&A activity picked up. That was a big theme for 2019. $32 billion of M&A activity last year in the gold sector alone. And that is a record. Even Robert Friedland gets out of bed for $32 billion. That's his minimum, but he will get up for that. It needs to also be said that 2019 was in many ways the year of the protest. The winds of change blew hard in 2019, and whether it was massive demonstrations for big issues like freedom in Hong Kong, or certain people taking the concept of the protest and making it a more niche boutique experience. I love that one. And the mining industry, of course, was not immune from protests as well. There were demonstrations outside of conferences in Australia and in London. Now, it is important to note that some of the protesters there were motivated by the great tragedy in Brazil, of Brumadinho, the dam collapse, where 270 people lost their lives. And I know that this industry takes safety extremely seriously. I know that great strides have been made on safety, and I know that great strides will continue to be made going forward, so such tragedies are avoided in the future. But it's also important to note that many of the protesters there profess to be simply anti-mining outright. Ban all mining, that's the mantra. But wasn't it inevitable? I mean, really, was it only a matter of time before people realized that they don't really need heat when it's cold, or electricity, or transportation, or cell phones, or buildings? I mean, that's also superfluous. We're going to move all these rocks around just for that? It's crazy. But on the other hand, there is the fact that the advent of civilization is defined in metallic terms, right? So we speak of the Copper Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, to define the epochs in which humanity rose up out of a more primitive state of existence. Now, some of these protesters might like us to go all the way back to the Stone Age, to which I say, so be it, but you'll have to mind that too. Thank you. Now it's the time that we've all been waiting for, the official induction ceremony. So without further ado, please help me to welcome John Baird, the chair of the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame.
Thank you, grazie. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the entire board, we're thrilled that you've joined us for this annual Canadian Mining Hall of Fame dinner and induction ceremony. Un accueil chaleureux de la part de la Temple de la Renommée du secteur minier canadien à tous ici ce soir qui représentent la francophonie canadienne. Let me begin by recognizing Anthony Vaccaro, our next generation Master of Ceremonies. Last year, our good friend Pierre Lassonde gave us his final entertaining performance as MC, and we're very glad to have him grace us with his presence again this year. Anthony, you know you have big shoes to fill, and I think so far, so good. What do you think? There you go, you're doing a fantastic job. I would like to also take a moment to recognize the members of the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame who are here with us this evening. I thank each of you for being here. You continue to represent exactly what makes mining an extraordinary industry. So please stand or wave when I call your name. Ross Beatty. Where are you? Yell out. And we thank Ross for his generous contribution as a Canadian Mining Hall supporting partner. Peter Bradshaw. Jim Carter. Robert Dickinson. Graham Farquharson. Graham was a longtime member of our board. Mike Nucky. Sandy Laird. And the one and only Pierre Lassonde. Norman Patterson. Ed Thompson. And last, but certainly not least, Bert Wasmund. Let's have a big round of applause for the whole gang. Sadly, we lost one dear friend last year. On November the 26th, John Hansold passed away. Inducted in 2012, John served our industry with distinction as a past director of the Mining Hall of Fame, a pioneering geochemist, entrepreneurial company builder, and dedicated industry advocate. John, you are missed. Thank you. 186 mining industry leaders have been inducted into our Hall of Fame. These individuals, they're discoverers, innovators, company builders, and responsible miners. They're geologists, engineers, and esteemed members of our community. Above all, they are proud champions of Canadian mining. Our mandate at the Hall of Fame is to celebrate the individual achievements of our past while striving to be mindful of what our industry is like today and what it might be in the future. Mining is a global industry, and Canada is its leader. In today's mining, we depend on and thrive on being inclusive. We know that mining is a place of opportunity for men and for women, for Indigenous people, and for new Canadians. Indeed, mining is a place for all Canadians. And great work is underway to ensure that that is the case. As a wide diversity of individuals reach the age of 65 and celebrate career-defining achievements, we're committed to honoring the most extraordinary of leaders. And this depends on you. This is the message I want to get out tonight. We want your help to find, formulate, and broadcast their stories. These nominations come from the mining public. They're not decided from the top down by the Mining Hall of Fame. Now, the word extraordinary may mean many things to many people. Over the course of the evening, I encourage you to reflect on who you feel is extraordinary in Canada's mining industry. And then please nominate that individual next year. Anyone can participate in the nomination process, and we're eager to hear from you. To ensure that there always is a next year, we're extremely appreciative of all our sponsors over the years. In 2019, we broadened the opportunities for brand building exposure through sponsorship opportunities, and we invite more organizations to consider sponsorship for next year. It is with gratitude that I thank all of our sponsors and supporters, as well as our founding and associate organizations, as seen on the current slide. So, well, now I've had an opportunity to tell you a little bit about the Mining Hall of Fame. Now it is time to induct new members. Anthony, let's get started.
Thank you very much, John. We had a little bit of a mistake there. One of my favorites, Terry McGibbon, a Hall of Fame inductee, is seated over there. Terry, can you raise? We forgot to call out Terry. Our apologies, Terry. Great guy. Incredible company builder. So, ladies and gentlemen, as John alluded to, it's time to induct 4 extraordinary individuals. This is what we're all here for. And our first inductee this evening is Jerry Asp. Please take a moment to listen to his video.
Jerry Asp is a man who wears many hats, literally and figuratively. His collection contains gifts that remind him of the friendships he has developed over decades of connecting Indigenous communities, mining companies, and governments.
You know, I think that what Jerry has done for the industry and for Indigenous people is he led by example. He was a real trailblazer. He showed that they and us, we can actually work in this industry in a meaningful way, contribute in a meaningful way, and build those bridges between the two different cultures.
Jerry is a very rare kind of leader. He is a leader that gives everything he has for the well-being of people. His mission in life is to help and to serve and to bring well-being to his nation and to all Indigenous people.
Jerry's inherent talents as a leader, educator, and entrepreneur come from his deep family roots.
My grandfather, George Adzursa, was the last true hereditary chief of the Tahltan people. Family was important, hard work was important, and education was important. My grandfather Asp was also from Sweden. He jumped ship in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, worked his way up through the logging camps in Wisconsin, learned to speak English, and then came west looking for gold up in the Stikine. Met my grandmother in 1919. They were married in 1920. In 1921, they moved to Porter's Landing. In 1947, when the town went up for sale, he bought the whole town. So we own the town of Porter's Landing. So that's the kind of background I came from.
Born in 1948, Jerry grew up in the north, a member of the Tahltan Nation, and would go on to become chief of the Tahltan Band. But his career started in mining.
Well, I chose mining because it was the bush life. I liked to be out in the bush, and I was big and strong, and that's what they wanted. They wanted big, strong guys. They could work and teach them how to do things in mining underground as well as on surface, the diamond drills.
Jerry went from dishwasher in the kitchen to working on diamond drills and underground. After 7 years with the Tantalus Butte coal mine, Jerry changed directions, going back to school to study contracting and project management. In 1985, Jerry suggested the community take on building their own houses at Telegraph Creek. As a result, the Tahltan Nation Development Corporation was born. By 1988, they started their first project for the mining industry at the Golden Bear Mine.
So we negotiated an agreement. We did a joint venture with Arctic Construction to do the 160-kilometer road. And within 3 weeks, I bought $3 million worth of equipment, and heavy equipment operation was underway.
The Tahltan Nation Development Corporation is still going strong and has expanded, supporting many areas of mine operations, from camp catering to IT services. Jerry is dedicated to his community and is credited with leading his nation out of poverty to full employment.
When we started the Tahltan Nation Development Corporation, we had 98% unemployment in the winter and 65% in the summer. And in 2006, we had 0 unemployment in the summer and 5% in the winter. And even today, we have no unemployment in our nation.
Jerry also wants the young people of the Tahltan Nation exposed to all possible educational opportunities. They have embraced that challenge.
Last year, in fact, we graduated 48 people from accredited schools, either grade 12 universities or accredited training programs. So we're probably among the national average now for grade 12 graduates. When we started, we were lucky to have 1 or 2 in the whole nation.
He is now happy to pass the torch.
He let go of his power in order to allow the next generation to be able to learn and to grow and to thrive from those successes and to make their own successes.
Jerry also helped create the award-winning Aboriginal Toolkit, which helps Indigenous communities understand the mining industry.
He's introduced mining in a way that provides real information to the First Nation communities and the Indigenous communities across the country of what mining means and how they can become part of projects and what they ask for when industry is in their territory.
Jerry was key in negotiating the first impact benefit agreement in British Columbia and established a number of organizations to help educate and connect people. Based in Whitehorse and now in his 70s, Jerry is still traveling the world with his latest venture, the Global Indigenous Development Trust.
We go down to places like Peru, Belize, Colombia. We've been down in Ecuador, and we're working in Canada on some of the places, helping to get the local Indigenous populations to understand mining.
He's an incredible visionary. He can see and hold a vision for who we are and where we need to go. He understands how to bring people together in a way that I haven't seen anyone else be able to do before. Just the most decent person you'll ever meet. Literally everything he does is for the betterment of people. Period, full stop.
Here to present the award to Jerry Yasp is Glenn Nolan, Vice President of Government Affairs for Noront Resources and Hall of Fame Director. Glenn.
Thank you, Anthony. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs. It is an absolute honor to present this award to one of Canada's most prominent Indigenous leaders and a true friend of mine. Jerry has always focused on building bridges between the mining sector and Indigenous communities. It's a goal that both of us share. And I am pleased to present this award to Chief Jerry Asp. Please join us at the podium, Jerry.
Cheaters on. Well, thank you, Glenn. That's the second time he's given me an award. And really, I can't wait to see what the next one you'll give me. I'd like to start by saying that I'm very humbled and deeply honored to be inducted into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. Believe you me, this is an honor that I don't take lightly. There's no saying that goes like this: if you see a turtle on top of a fence post, you can be sure that it helped getting up there. So like the turtle, I'd like to thank a few people who helped me reach this goal up here. First, I'd like to thank my wife, Ida. We've been together for 52 years. We have 4 children. Thelma, Geraldine, Cynthia, and Arthur. They're all here tonight. We have 8 grandchildren. 2 of them are here tonight, and we have 6 great-grandchildren. I'd like to thank them because they made me realize that a man with a wife and children had responsibilities. Back in the day, I used to drink a bottle of scotch a day, and I'd smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. I haven't had a cigarette in 42 years, and I haven't had a drink in over 40 years, and I don't miss either one of them. And I'd like to thank the Teltan leadership, past and present, for their foresight and vision and the guts to follow a vision and stick to it, to carve a path of a better way of life with meaningful opportunities for our people, namely Chad Day, the president of our central government, Chief Marie Kwok, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight because she picked up a flu bug, Chief Rick McLean from the Teltan Telegraph at East Lake, and Norman Day, who is here representing the Board of Directors for the Teltan Nation Development Corporation. As I said, unfortunately, Marie Kwok couldn't attend tonight, but she sent a councillor here, John Knoll, to represent the Iskut Teltans. But I'd further like to say thank you to the Teltan Central Government, the Iskut First Nation, the Teltan First Nation, and the Board of Directors for TNDC for the generously supplied the funds for me and my wife, our 4 children, a son-in-law, 2 granddaughters, and a couple cousins to attend this event tonight. And I sincerely thank them for that. I'd like to thank my sister Nancy. I have 3 sisters here tonight. But Nancy raised funds and she brought 4 young people here tonight to this event from Telegraph Creek. I'm truly honored and humbled by the fact that the Teltan leadership, individual Teltans, my family members and our friends have traveled so far to be here to this event to support me. I want you to understand that all of the Teltans being here is a much bigger deal than you would think, and I'm going to tell you why. On August 5th, 2018, a forest fire went through our reserve in Telegraph Creek, burning 27 structures in town. 21 Teltan member homes, 2 nurses' residence, the Teltan Health and Social Service Building, Catholic Church and residence. We also lost 22 structures and many outbuildings and vehicles in the surrounding area. Some damage was done to our store, the community center, and the RCMP buildings. In the first week of October 2018, Minister Jane Philpotts toured the community. Afterwards, in an interview with CBC, she said, "The Teltan Nation itself incurred the worst structural damage of any First Nation community in recorded Canadian history." When the town was evacuated, Health Canada said that the residents, especially the children, couldn't move back into town until all debris from the fire was cleaned up, as it posed a health and safety risk. Chief Rick McLean and his staff in the TNDC had all the sites cleaned up and approved by the first week of December so the families could move back home for Christmas. On October the 25th, 2018, I did a presentation at Red Talks here in Toronto, and I told the story of taking our nation from 98% unemployment to zero, and I talked about the devastating fire. I said then that like the phoenix, the Tahltan Nation will rise again from the ashes, bigger, better, and stronger. Last year, Chief McLean brought in 8 modular homes to help alleviate the housing problem, and as we speak, they're building 9 new homes with Tahltan contractors and Tahltan labor. Further to that, the community is looking at adding solar panels to each house to assist with the electrical bills. We're also looking at the feasibility of taking the town of Telegraph Creek off of diesel generation and move to bioenergy. The motto for that effort was called Tahltan Strong, and I'm wearing the medallion tonight that my daughter made for me, Cynthia, and it says Tahltan Strong with the Tahltan outline of our nation, traditional territory. So by the number of Tahltans that have traveled from northwestern British Columbia and the Yukon to attend this event, you can see that the strength of our nation. We have come out of this mess bigger, better, and stronger. And I'd like to thank a few prospecting partners who taught me so much about prospecting, about how to survive in the bush, like my uncles, Ed and Herman Asp, Freddie Hasselberg, mining guys like Gordon Guttreth, Steve McAlpine, Rick Van Nieuwenhuis. They all contributed to my journey in the mining industry. And I'd like to say thank you to my business partner, Sonia Molodecki, for suggesting that I be inducted into the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame and for gathering support for the idea. And I would certainly like to thank PDAC for nominating me. Sue Craig is a very special person to me, and I can't thank her enough for the tireless effort collecting support letters for my nomination, for getting Galore Creek Mining Corporation to sponsor a table for some of my family and friends here tonight. And last but not least, I'd like to thank the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame Board of Directors and their chair, John Baird, for selecting me to be inducted in the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame. Many times people have said to me, you won many awards, had a distinguished career, traveled the world, worked on many different projects. What accomplishments are you the most proud of? Well, other than my family, which includes my brothers and sisters, and like I said, I have 3 sisters here tonight, I'm most proud of the fact that I helped take our nation, the Tahltans, from abject poverty to affluence, and to help break the cycle of welfare culture in the Tahltan Nation forever. When I started the TNDC in 1985, we had 98% unemployment in the winter and 65% unemployment in the summer on our reserves. 80% of our members were on welfare. We had a serious alcohol and drug problem, a high suicide rate, and very low education standards. By 2006, we had 0 unemployment in the summer and 5% in the winter, and our suicide rate dropped to 0, and we had very few people on welfare. Last year, we graduated 46 students from grade 12 and 6 or 7 more from colleges and universities. And in May, we graduated our first mining engineer. And I know we have at least 12 to 15 people enrolled right now in accredited apprentice programs. When we first started negotiating with the mining companies, we already had the Tahltan Resource Development Policy in place. But as significant as that policy was, it was the fact that we wanted our people developed along with our resources that made all the difference to our nation's success. When we were negotiating our first Tahltan participation agreement with the owners of the Golden Bear mine, one of the reps said, "We think that you Tahltans are being unreasonable." Pat Zerza was then band manager for the Iskut Tahltans, and he said, "You, the resource developers, are taking away our way of life. We only ask that you replace it with something equitable. I don't think that's being unreasonable." At our annual assembly last July, a member said, "I'm not happy with the mining agreements that we have since all we get is a few jobs." So I looked into that fact. In Red Chris Mine alone at the time, we have 156 employed workers, And that doesn't include the people who work for the Teltan Nation Development Corporation or other contractors for the Teltans. Those workers make an average of $80,000 to $120,000 a year. And if you do the math, that means we get $15 to $16 million a year right just from the Red Chris mine. And that's not chicken feed. And that's just one project. We figured it out now that today, all the mining and exploration projects in our territory together are contributing about $30 million in wages and contracts annually to Teltan members. What really brought this home to me was last November, 3 young Teltan girls, 20, 21, 22, left Red Chris, flew to Vancouver, then on to Indonesia and Thailand. They send photos back every day, and after a 10-day vacation was up, they came back for the next 2-week turnaround in Red Chris. They must have had a great time because one girl said, "I have to come back to work to rest up from my holiday." So why is this significant? Well, it's because if this was 1985, those same girls would have probably been walking around the reserve, dragging 2 or 3 kids behind them, waiting for their next welfare check. Instead, they are now living and planning their future on their own terms. In October 2019, my great-nephew Lando Ball, and his mother's here tonight, by the way, competed in the World Under-12 Martial Arts competition in Austria. He took the bronze medal. The U.S. competitor defeated him by 1 point, and he then was in turn beaten by the Russian by 1 point. So only 2 points separated gold from the bronze. But further to that, Chief Rick McLean's nephew will be going to Ireland in March to compete in the under 16-year-old world weightlifting competition. This is what made all the hard work worth it. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank our current leadership for carrying on the work that we started, and I'd like to thank the mining industry for being a catalyst which helped move our nation from abject poverty to affluence. And for that, I hold my hands up to you. I do.
We would now like to take this opportunity to thank our champion sponsors. EY Canada, delivering leading mining industry insight to build a better working world. Magris Resources, an owner and operator of global mining assets. Teck, Canada's largest diversified resource company, responsibly producing materials essential to our modern world, with operations and projects across Canada, the United States, Chile, and Peru. Yamana Gold, a Canadian-based precious metals producer, mining profitably and responsibly across operations throughout the Americas.
Thank you for that, Jerry. An incredible speech from an incredible person. We'll now celebrate the career of Alex Paulo. Let's learn more.
Alex Paulo's career success can be attributed to his unique combination of technical, financial, and people skills. Born in Montreal in 1932, Alex obtained a bachelor's degree in metallurgical engineering from McGill University in 1954.
I was in chemical engineering, and my professor, he attracted me away from chemical engineering into metallurgy with a scholarship.
From 1954 to 1976, Alex held various positions with Noranda. He became known for his unassuming style and commitment to innovation.
He had many things that he could have been seeking recognition for, but didn't. And it took me years to get stories out of him that would allow me to realize just how much he had contributed to the company.
Alex's technical breakthroughs and his focus on safe, environmentally responsible resource development helped create the strong platform of sustainability that underpins the entire Canadian mining industry today. Alex's commitment to innovation was evident in his early career projects. He was instrumental in the development of a new smelting process at Noranda.
The construction of that reactor, the new smelter, also enabled us to build an acid plant which and capture a good percentage of the gases.
It allowed Horn Smelter to continue on in operation for a lot longer time than other smelters because it was able to solve some of the problems associated with acid rain, and it was certainly energy efficient.
If you ask me honestly, I would take no credit for it because it was a true teamwork.
Alex was also key in the development of the Gaspé puncher, designed to mechanize a labor-intensive process.
There was a young chap on my shift who insisted that the puncher was too arduous a task, and there's a much easier way to do it. Fortunately, we were both working on shift, so we secretly assembled one, and that's how it was born.
Since the late 1960s, we have sold over 250 units of the Gaspé puncher to virtually every copper smelter and some nickel smelters all over the world. By 1976, Alex had become VP of Noranda's copper and zinc operations. In the late 1980s, he was the principal negotiator in the acquisition of Falconbridge.
We were sitting at a Noranda board meeting when one of the secretaries ran into the office saying that somebody's calling. It was a company called Trelleborg. They wanted a partner because they couldn't afford all of Falconbridge. Within 12 hours, we were on a plane. We liked each other right away. We trusted each other. And within 2 days, we had closed the deal to buy what turned out to be one of the biggest operations in Canada.
That deal changed the course of Alex's career, as he became CEO of Falconbridge and also president and CEO of Noranda. He retired from his position of chairman of Falconbridge in 2003.
In the period that he had these responsibilities, we opened up 3 of the really fine mines in the world, company makers on their own. There was the Antamina mine in Peru, the Collahuasi mine in Chile, and the Raglan mine in Quebec, and they are all still very active today.
Alex was also a big supporter of Noranda's research center.
At one time, we had 100 researchers. We also were top of the line in the business of concentrating minerals, not just smelting them and producing, but concentrating them. And some of the top people in that field were products of the research center.
Alex also led the industry in addressing environmental concerns. At one point, he closed the leach plant in Gaspé to protect the York River.
We closed it because the York River is a salmon river that is loved by everybody, not just Gaspésians, and was going to last a lot longer than our ore body.
Alex attributes his success to what he learned during his time living in small towns, where he took on community and family challenges. He calls his son Lou the heart and soul of the family.
One of our children is afflicted with Down syndrome, and that's one of 4 children. So we had a problem with schooling for him. At the time, we were living in Rouyn-Noranda, where we had to drive him 40 miles in blinding snowstorm to get him to a school where they would accept him. Now in Oakville, he's sitting pretty.
While in Gaspé, Alex helped launch and was the editor of a local newspaper for 8 years that had a circulation of 2,000.
So you ran the Voyageur newspaper. And is that you in the photograph?
Yes, that's me. And I'm actually doing a headline there because we were using the offset process for printing, which was pretty well pioneering work for newspapers.
Following his retirement, Alex went on to work on 19 company boards. He is recognized as being a great mentor throughout his career.
I'm sure there are a lot of other people would want to thank Alex for the mentorship and the sort of enthusiasm that he showed, enabled them to broaden their experience from metallurgists out to the broader mining industry. He brought all that, I think, to a lot of people, and particularly to myself.
His impact is still felt today, years after his retirement. Ahead of his time in many ways, his countless innovations benefited both workers and the community at large.
Here to present the award to Alex Ballo is Chris Twig-Molsey, Senior Advisor at Hatch and Canadian Mining Hall of Fame Director. Chris.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's my great privilege and pleasure tonight to introduce Alex Ballo, who's earned a unique place in Canadian mining history. He led and helped build both Noranda and Falconbridge, as we've heard, into two of Canada's most successful mining and metallurgical empires. Driven by a visionary understanding of our business and the future importance of safety, productivity, and the environment, he developed and implemented key innovations in copper production, initially at the Gaspé, as we've heard, subsequently the revolutionary Noranda reactor at the Horn, and more recently for the nickel business, the ice-breaking concentrate carrier to Raglan. His ability to assemble winning teams, develop staff into future leaders in our industry, and to deliver successful projects globally is testament to the strength and impact of his leadership. I'm honored to present this award to Alex. Please come to the podium.
In case you didn't recognize it, that's the Hungarian Rhapsody. My parents both were born in Hungary, and they met here in Canada. And I was checking on my father's detailed past. And his first job in Canada was mining up in the God's country, they call it, Northern Ontario, where all they were mining was stone. But there was a little bit of limestone in it, and the guy that was my father's boss, who didn't speak Hungarian, but he advised him that it was not a job for any human being, because it was a little too dusty. So that's my background, which I didn't know about till about 3 weeks ago. But I do have a little. Thanks. And we're supposed to identify people who have played a special role in our careers, and it's a little tricky. I'm sure I'm going to forget a few. I've got a dozen here, which I briefly tell you about, and these were largely ordinary people, and specifically people like Albert Pelche, who's a self-made instrument technician, whose stubbornness and creativity led to the development of both the Noranda reactor and the Gaspé puncher. And this was a guy who did not finish university. Pierre-Henri, he was a Gaspésian chicken farmer who painted safety signs for Gaspé Copper and was editor of the Gaspé Voyageur before becoming Vice President of Pratt & Whitney. Scotty Gary, a true Scot, dedicated to safety and health in our mines and smelters. Mike Nucky and Graham Farquharson, two Canadian geologists who made history. Philip Mackey, a talented metallurgist and friend. David Carr and the Brascan team. Bill Brissenden and Alf Powis, the best mentors one could possibly have.
David Bumstead and Bill Deeks, marketing geniuses. Frank Frantisak, who guided Noranda and awakened Canadian mining industry to growing environmental concerns. And then there was Lance Taggart, who shared with me in the dramatic acquisition of Falconbridge, and we traveled the world together. Jerry Hatch, his outstanding engineering teams were frequent partners on major projects worldwide. They did projects that were not just bricks and mortar, but they became a part of our company virtually. Of course, the team, the Balo Forte team, was the most important team of all. My wife and daughters and my son and two sons are not both all present because Lou, who you saw on the movie, couldn't make it. Now, he's mentally challenged, and my family will be the first to claim that our characters were all built by Lou. My children played a special role in my career, and they were obliged to move their home several times, and without exception, they valued the experience. Many thanks to the organizers of this outstanding event.
The Canadian Mining Hall of Fame would also like to thank this year's gold sponsors: Barrick Gold Corporation, Franco-Nevada Corporation, and Pear Tree Securities.
Congratulations to Alex. Our next video honors the life and work of the late Hans Lundberg. Please roll the video.
The memories Kim Lundberg has of his grandfather, affectionately known as Far, consist of the many things Hans collected on his travels and Kim's childhood memories of his visits.
When we came to visit, he'd hand us a handful of pencil crayons, colored pencil crayons, and he'd take us down into the basement. He had these huge walls with magnetometer survey results graphed out on paper. You know, he'd hand me a red one and he said, "I want you to fill this one with red," and my brother would get one and he'd do the yellow part.
As children, they were unaware of his impact on the mining industry.
I would say that Lundberg was one of the fathers of geophysics in Canada, but other people who are geochemists may say that he was one of the fathers of geochemistry in Canada.
He actually created the core of people that became the founders of modern exploration geochemistry in Canada.
Hans Lundberg's story began in Sweden.
My grandfather was born at Bullavaken, which is the family home in Lidingö, which is the east island of Stockholm across the bay from the Maid City. He had an early interest in mining. I mean, in 1911, he was making sketches of miners, mines, and mining operations in a little sketchbook. So there's obviously something that fascinated him about mining that was an abiding interest for the rest of his life.
After graduating from the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden, Hans Lundberg became a lecturer at the Institute. While still in his 20s, he and a colleague developed the award-winning Equipotential Method, which led to the discovery of deposits in Sweden in 1918 and 1922.
The Equipotential Method that he invented with his colleague was a technique where you would inject current into the ground at a very low frequency, essentially what's known as a direct current technique, and you would measure the potential on the ground and find places where the potential was equal. And by looking at how that potential distorted itself on the surface of the ground, you could work out if there were conductive features underneath.
His acclaim in Sweden attracted attention from the United States.
He came over in, I believe it was 1923, at the behest of a financier in New York. His first contract was for 6 months, and I believe he was offered $125 US per day, which in those days would have been, for some people, a year's salary.
When working for Asarco, he made one of his most important discoveries at Buckens in Newfoundland, where he was one of the first to combine geophysical and geochemical surveys.
They did a survey in a swampy area where there was no obvious geology. No sooner did they dig down below the cover than they found mineralization.
And so they transformed something that had been of interest into what became a very important mine, the largest mine of its kind in Canada at the time. And so that basically sealed his reputation. 1926, he became kind of a rock star overnight.
He also experimented with geobotany, looking for traces of minerals in plants.
He harvested the plants and burned the leaves and extracted gold from what was left of the ash. It didn't amount to a whole lot of gold, but it did work. That was the point of that exercise.
Hans Lundberg operated a successful company in Canada during the 1930s and 40s, working on over 40 projects across Canada. But he may be best known for his work with airborne geophysical surveys using helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft, and working with his son, Sten, a World War II pilot.
He was one of the first people in Canada to buy a helicopter. He and his son would go out and collect the geophysical data. One of the first instruments that they put on the helicopter was a magnetometer, and he used that to collect aeromagnetic data.
He didn't limit his efforts to mining. He gained recognition for using his technology in unusual ways. One was offering to help an oil company survey for petroleum.
He said, if it's successful, if I help you find oil, you give me an oil well. And apparently that well produced something like $25,000 a month for years. And so that was his way of getting paid.
He also gained recognition for finding prehistoric bones in Mexico and an ore body in a crater in Arizona. Some say Hans Lundberg was a man on the forefront of the industry, as evident in a talk from 1948.
He talks about 3D visualization of the Earth. He talks about using aerial surveys in all manner of ways to obtain information about the near surface and the subsurface. He jumped ahead 40 to 50 years in that talk. And you'd look at it and you'd say, where did he get that information? There was nothing existed like that. And he predicted all of this just out of the blue.
It's not just his discoveries, but Lundberg's willingness to share his vision, findings, and technology that have made him an important figure in the history of geophysics in Canada.
I'd now like to welcome back to the stage John Baird, Chairman of the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, to present the award to Kim Lundberg, grandson of the late Hans Lundberg. John.
Well, as a geophysicist, this presentation is a very special one for me because Hans Lundberg really was a visionary. In a 1948 CIM paper, he wrote, "As to the communication of data from the field to the office, it is quite evident that within the near future, this will be carried out automatically by specially built machines." Well, the near future had to wait 50 years until we got some field portable computers. And to me, that is a very visionary statement. I'll give you another one. from the same CIM paper. The habit of drawing maps that show 2 dimensions only will be succeeded by new stereoscopic projections so that the geophysical results will be seen in 3 dimensions. 70 years later, it's a 3D world. And here's one more from the same paper. The age determinations and microchemical sampling of waters, soils, and plant life will be developed into very efficient field methods. Hans Lundberg was surely ahead of his time. Thank you to Hans' grandson, Kim Lundberg, who you saw in the video, for accepting this award on Hans' behalf. Kim, would you please come to the podium?
Oh, there we go. Hey, good evening, everyone. I am Kim Torkelsen Lundberg, Hans Torkel Frederick Lundberg's eldest grandson. We called him Farfar, father's father. This suit that I'm wearing is the suit that he wore when he was granted his doctorate in geophysics by the King of Sweden in 1956. The tailor who altered it to fit me was astonished at the quality of the wool. It's still intact, there are no moth holes, nothing. We really haven't treated it very specially except kept it hung up. Anyway, so that doctorate was awarded to my grandfather for his life work in geophysical spot prospecting, exploration, and mineral finds, particularly in Sweden, but also everywhere else in the globe. Before I go on, I'd like to congratulate all the other inductees this year and past inductees who may be present. I'd like to thank the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame for recognizing Hans Lundberg for his wildly successful career, says Peter C. Newman, in geophysics and ground and airborne explorations, pioneering work in those areas through the 1920s to 1970, roughly. I would like to thank the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame, Sean Baird, and his CMH staff, Deborah Beckles, Carla, for their great assistance in getting us all here, because the table up front here is all progeny from Hans Lundberg. Except, of course, for my mom, who was also here. I would like to thank Adrian and her crew from Penuh for the short film that we just saw about Farfar. Boy, that struck some chords for me. I'd also like to thank Ken Witherly. Where are you, Ken? Over here, yes. And the team that he assembled, Richard Smith, Rolf Pedersen, Dave Fountain, Doug Morrison, and Bob Cothrow, and others for writing this year's Canadian Mining Hall of Fame nomination application for Hans Torkel Frederick Lundberg. Thank you also to the Northern Miner, Peter Newman and Pierre Burton and others who have written about my grandfather. But especially, I'd like to thank Farfar's flying team. That's the ground crew and the people who actually flew the airplanes for his geophysical survey using magnetometers. This team, without this team, none of this would have happened. And it was an extraordinary team. They ran a lab north of Toronto in the late 40s and 1950s, developing all the machines that he made or used. And these are some of the guys that he worked with for almost the entire duration. Lloyd Leach, who was the director of field operations and the lab manager. Sten Lundberg, his son and my dad. And John Neufeld, who were pilots. Rolly Marriott, Wally Hobbs, and Ben Boyle, mechanics, that's the ground crew, and Bill Brown, who was the navigator and the air-to-ground radio liaison. My mom and I had to sort of brainstorm to remember these guys' names because they're not written down anywhere we could find. Here are a few remembrances of my Farfar. In his father's bound telegrams, from about 1909 to 1931-32, I found a telegram from 1926 to Carl T. Lundberg. Congratulations from Antipodes on anniversary, Hans. He was probably in New Zealand, which would be the antipodal spot from Leadinga across the world by a straight line. And the message is interestingly in English, not Swedish, and in lowercase too. He was in a hurry. I think it costs more for capital letters. But it's a laconic and precise message nonetheless. And that certainly describes him as I recall. In the mid-1950s, this was talked about in the film a little bit. Farfar's grandchildren, Lee, Sten, and myself, were all here tonight with wives. We're at Farfar and Farmore's house when we were distracted by Farfar, who gave us pencil crayons and led us downstairs into the bowels of the house to colorize and help fill in some contour maps of underground rock formations from his geophysical surveys. This is before 3D. These maps were pinned on the walls of his home's huge basement. We never finished these colorings, but now that I feel we're never really meant to, they were just busy work while they talked about adult stuff upstairs. In 1958, we're at the Burtons' home, my mom's parents, that is, for Christmas festivities. Farfar led a Swedish Christmas folk song and simultaneous serpentine dance from the living room through the French doors into the foyer, around the foyer, back into the living room, around the living room, into the dining room, around the dining table, back. By this time, everybody's laughing so hard they could hardly sing the song anymore, including my Farfar, who was giggling all the way through. He had to have help singing the song from my dad's wife, Marnie, who's here with us today, and my grandmother, my Far Moore, Hans' wife. It went like this. Hej tomtegubbar, slå I glasen och låt oss lustiga vara en liten tid vi alla har med mycken möda och stort besvär. Hej tomtegubbar, slå vi... And it went on, right? And so on and repeated to far... 30 years teaching music does it, you know. And to Farfar's glee, with much laughter and hilarity from everyone. He loved to sing and dance, and he liked to listen to classical music. Beethoven was his favorite, rightly so. Through the 1950s to early 1960s, we're often at Hans and his wife Senia's home. Farfar proudly talked with us about the indigenous items that he had collected, he bought, or traded for on his prospecting expeditions, mostly in the Arctic and in northern Canada. There are also ore samples from his many mineral finds. And I can mean chunks of rock this big just loaded with emeralds, chunks of rock this big just loaded with gold, and several ore samples just like that. Most of these collections were in his 100-foot long living room in two long floor cabinets, which kept us mesmerized for hours and hours when we were visiting. Also, there were more Indigenous pieces downstairs on the walls of the immense family room. His stamp collection, which was a passion for him, was in a large walk-in vault in the living room behind a tapestry, into which occasionally we were invited to enter and be shown some of the new stamps for his extensive collection and some individual fantastically valuable stamps. At one point he had the $1 million Canadian beaver stamp, one of the first stamps ever printed in Canada. For my interest in stamps, Farfar gave me a Canadian starter album, stamp packs, loose stamps, and some first-day issue Canadian stamp blocks signed by the artist. These examples were me then, tangible indicators of his success. Thank you very much for this moment in time. And let us all have a great and prosperous new year. Thank you. Adieu.
We would like to thank this year's silver sponsors: BMO, Panda Productions, Syncrude Canada Limited.
And last, but certainly not least, we recognize Ebe Shirkus. Please roll Ebe's video.
Ebe Shirkus can be called a true company builder, helping take Agnico Eagle Mines from a one-mine Canadian company with 400 employees to an international company with over 5,700 employees.
We wouldn't be here today ready to produce almost 2 million ounces of gold next year if it wasn't for Ebe's contribution.
Ebe was not only a crucial part of Agnico Eagle Mines' future, by all means, a visionary, he was also a mentor who believed in taking chance on people.
Ebe was born in Stuttgart, Germany. His parents emigrated to Canada when Ebe was 7 months old.
We arrived in Val-d'Or, Quebec on September 22nd, 1952. My mom and dad, along with other members of the family, immigrated for a better life. And my dad became a miner, working at Lamaque Mines and then later on at Manitou Barview Mines, working on surface. It was very common for him to take me to the mine. I was able to wander and watch what he was doing, and he would explain things to me, so that's how it all started.
Ebe's family wanted him to work with his head, not his hands, so university was a must. He graduated from McGill with a degree in geology.
During school, one of the first jobs I had was as a line cutter and a geophysical technician. I thought to myself, if I ever want to move on in a mining company, that this is going to be the path. I want to explore mining operations and finding deposits and working with deposits.
Ebe later went on to qualify as a geological engineer. From 1975 to 1985, he worked his way up in the industry from mine geologist to mine superintendent and project manager. His first permanent job was as a beat geologist at Manitou Barview Mines near Val-d'Or, Quebec. His path to the top began in 1985 when he was hired as a project manager at the Damagami mine, which became the LaRonde mine.
First thing we did was close it down 2 months later. This burly miner, Jack Brooks, he walks into my office, and it's a little dingy office, and he says, "You can't shut this place down." I says, "Why not? There's too much gold down there."
They decided to start drilling.
We're getting core boxes and core boxes of massive sulfide, and we hit the what looked like to me the mother lode, and since we didn't have the geologist, that was one of the last drill holes I ever logged.
LaRonde will ultimately end up being the largest gold-bearing massive sulfide deposit in the history of the world. We've mined over 5 million ounces. We'll likely mine 10 plus million ounces there.
We speak about 31, 32 years later, and this is a world-class deposit.
LaRonde was just the beginning. Goldex was the next project in which Ebe was involved, turning a low-grade mine into a moneymaker. The next step was to look for international opportunities. They started in Mexico.
We were able to get with Pinos Altos, got involved into heap leach into our first foreign jurisdiction.
Next, they set their sights on Finland.
We always went out as a team. That sort of trust comes from having worked together now for over 20 years. There's no nonsense. So I said, it's time to do that. Yeah, let's go. And that became Kittilä, and now that's Europe's largest gold producer.
As the company grew, Ebe transitioned from Vice President of Operations to President and Chief Operating Officer. Under his watch, the company expanded to Nunavut in challenging Arctic conditions, relying on the expertise they had amassed in Val-d'Or, Quebec.
Meadowbank, from acquisition to pouring its first ounce of gold, it was an incredible accomplishment in 2.5 years for something that was, well, let's give it a try.
There's that famous saying in mining that mines are made, they're not found, and Ebe is an effective leader at making that happen. We're a company that's been very successful over 6 decades. We're grinders, and Ebe was one of the best grinders.
Ebe retired in 2012 and went on to board work. His legacy isn't just as a company builder, but he's also recognized for building a strong company culture. Ebe is known for making everyone feel acknowledged and important.
There was no distinguishing between the management teams and the employees working on the site. Everybody dressed the same, wore the same helmets, everybody was equal, and all contributed to the success of the mines.
He mentored a lot of people. Many of us are presently executive in different mining companies. So this man, Ebe, really helped to develop the mining industry, the mining executive.
Looking back, Ebe says he's very proud of where it all began, at La Ronde.
La Ronde was the mine that basically put Agnico on the map, and to be there when the core came out of the ground, to see it grow to what it is today in the company, that's pretty tough to beat.
Here to present the award to Ebe is José Méteau, President and CEO of the Quebec Mining Association. José, please take the podium.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Je suis très heureuse d'être ici ce soir pour honorer la très belle carrière de Monsieur Ebe Shirkus. As seen in the video, it is with Ebe's leadership that Agnico Eagle transformed from a regional, single mine company into a top-performing global gold producer. Many of our members have had a good fortune to work alongside Mr. Shirkus. The people we have spoken to were all unanimous in their recognition of his outstanding qualities. They all appreciated his passion for mining, his leadership, and above all, his dynamic approach and deep respect for his workers. His great strength was to make everyone he came into contact with feel that they were important to the mine operation. This induction to the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame is a well-deserved recognition of Ebe's career. La candidature d'Ebe Shirkus faisait l'unanimité au sein de l'association, au sein de notre association. Et nous sommes très fiers de pouvoir souligner ce soir sa très grande et belle carrière. At the Quebec Mining Association, we are happy and very proud that Ebe's career, Ebe's commitment to the Canadian mining industry is recognized tonight. So it is my honor to present this award to Mr. Yves Shirkus. Now, Yves, it would be your turn to come up to the podium.
I don't know how many of you watched the Golden Globes over the last week, but I'm sort of feeling a bit of a Ricky Gervais moment here. I know I'm the last one. I know you're all thinking, hopefully he doesn't speak too long. We're out of wine and we would like to go back to the bar and renew acquaintances. But as Ricky said, I don't care. So that particular song, I Won't Back Down, spoke to me on multiple levels. It was selected around the dinner table with my family. I think on a personal level it meant I never understood the word no or it can't be done. It also reflects Agnico Eagle, a company with humble roots in cobalt and joutel, a company founded by Paul Penuh over 62 years ago, today a major producer with multiple mines, still around, never back down. Also, it talks to our mining industry. It's not a walk in the park, as you saw in that video. It's a very tough business. It's easy to lambaste, it's easy to assail. Very few appreciate the effort required to find, develop, finance, build, operate a mine, let alone multiple mines. We have to stand our ground. There is no easy way out. In terms of thanks, first off, I have to congratulate my co-inductees. As they all mentioned, one never works towards or plans to be inducted. It just sort of happens. Aussi, j'aimerais remercier l'Association minière du Québec et les mines Agnico Eagle Limitées de chapeauter cette initiative de ma part. J'aimerais surtout souligner l'implication du président directeur général José Méteau pour son implication personnelle. J'aimerais aussi remercier M. Dan Toliesi, son prédécesseur à l'association. Dan introduced me to the players in the Quebec mining industry. And I think our highlight was the 1995 referendum. And we were miners first, lobbyists second. I'd also like to thank, the Abitibi region, Val-d'Or, Quebec, my hometown, Rouyn-Noranda, both towns with a rich multicultural mining tradition. Probably a large number of people here tonight have had some exposure to the region at some point in time. I'd also like to, thank the province of Quebec, one of the best places for resource development on the globe. Blessed with a wealth of resources, politically stable, consistent regulatory environment, highly skilled workforce, entrepreneurship. One only realizes this once one travels the globe. The list of mining companies who operated mines or got their start is a who's who of the world mining industry. Noranda, Falconbridge, Placer Dome, Lac Minerals, Cambior, IM Gold, Barrick, my alma mater, Camflo, the Osiscos, IOC, Glencore, Inco, Quebec Cartier, Goldcorp, and of course Agnico Eagle. J'aimerais aussi remercier le député d'Abitibi-Est, ministre responsable de la région d'Abitibi-Témiscamingue et de la région du nord-ouest du Québec, Pierre Dufour. Minister Dufour recently had a congratulatory resolution passed on my behalf in the Quebec National Assembly. We have both come a long way from the early 90s when we first met in the Village Minier de Bourlamaque in the Quebec historical site,
formerly known as Tex-Lamaque Mine. Merci, Ministre Dufour. The video covered the early days. It's hard to believe that Mom and Dad, with all their possessions in hand, and including me, struck off into the unknown, hoping for a better life for my sister Bridget, who happens to be here tonight with her husband Tim. Many years later, after my sister and I were well established in our careers, Dad, fighting terminal cancer, confided that they indeed had made the right decision. One of my first mentors was Dr. Brian Meikle of Camflo Mines, a former inductee. I got to appreciate and understand teamwork, interpersonal relationships, and most importantly, understanding an ore body, grade control, stress testing with price sensitivity. And that was also followed by Ed Falgren, the former president of Koshner Mines in Red Lake. The sense of pride, ownership, that the former employee still had with respect to a mothballed mine site. Although the mine site was dormant, the site was impeccable. That lesson would serve me well. And then I get to the Agnico years. The first senior management person I met at Agnico was Anton Adamczyk, the general manager. He referred me to Don Lerond. They both said I had the job after the interview, but would have to convince Paul Penuh and his right-hand man, Wenzel Hubacek. The rest is history. Anton, he flew all the way in from Croatia to be here tonight. Thanks, Anton. Stand up, we can all see you. And that brings me to Paul Penuh, another Hall of Famer, founder of Agnico. What can be said that has already not been said about Paul? Wherever you are tonight, Paul, I hope we did you proud. It was his decentralized management style and his quips that set the tone for the future. The mine shouldn't be run by people. The mine should be run by people on the mine site. If they don't know what they're doing, they shouldn't be there. I only care about one number, the one at the bottom right-hand corner. Gold does not rot. If we have it, it's only a matter of time. Lerond and Goldex took 25 years and 35 years respectively. He also said, if you give me the dynamite, I'll find the money. In today's nomenclature, we ended up being disruptors in the 1980s. We were upstarts surrounded by Placer Dome, Lac Minerals, Cambior, Inco, Barrick, and Noranda. Our team, what can I say about them? First person I met, Marcel Bordelot, chief accountant. Upon arrival in a yellow Volkswagen, he just said, "Who the hell is this?" But Marcel counted the money over the many years. What little we had of it. Marcel, take a bow. Come on. Paul-Henri, our first hire, chief engineer, designed the mine layout that is still in production today, 32 years later, set the tone for the future. Dan Racine, CEO of Yamana, Christian Provencher, Michel Leclerc, Carol Plummer, Daniel Paré, Fred Langevin, and many more followed in his giant footsteps. Paul-Henri, take a bow. This is an old tradition that I used to do at the mine. Claude Leveillé, manager of HR, devised the platform that provided a security blanket for our employees and their families, resulting in one of the lowest turnover rates and safety performances in the industry. Claude, take a bow. Alain Blackburn, chief geologist. He had a nose for gold, but was also a hardcore production geologist. All that followed in his footsteps. Marc Legault, Guy Gosselin, Diane Duquette, the list is too long. Frontline production, whether they went on to reserve estimation, exploration, operations, property evaluation, all had frontline experience. Alain, where are you? Take your bow. Jean Robitaille, he was on the video, mill superintendent. Lerond was a polymetallic ore, difficult to treat. His high standards cracked the code. His team, Paul Cousin, Nancy Gay, Julie Belanger, Yvon Sylvestre, seconded by the construction team, oversaw the metallurgical flow sheet and construction over every single Agnico plant built. And then we had Réal Racicot, master mechanic, and Félix Saint-Amand. Before I wander on, Jean, we've seen you in the video, so take a bow anyways. But we had Réal, and we also had Félix Saint-Amand, chief electrician. Hardcore guys who could fix anything at any time of day, week, especially helpful when money was tight, and supervised the ongoing expansion at construction at Goldex, Lapa, and LaRonde. And then we have Louise Grandin. I call her Mother Earth, setting the benchmark for environmental stewardship. Who develops bacterial strains that can destruct cyanide, ammonia, and neutralize toxicity in mine effluent? She did. She also spearheaded the effort resulting in my induction tonight. Thank you so much, Louise. Take a bow. And this brings me to a gentleman who needs no introduction, Sean Boyd. What can we say about a working relationship that lasted for 27 years and lasts today? We were behind Paul, beside Paul, and then on our own heading deeper at LaRonde and our first foray outside of our comfort zone in northwestern Quebec into parts unknown. It was our reliance on one increasingly deeper asset and the increasing risk profile that started the search for an open-pittable, simpler deposit. We were at a live webcast once at the Hilton, and after a particular bad quarter at LaRonde, I mentioned to a shareholder that we were learning to adjust to deep mining condition. And that particular irate shareholder replied, "We pay you to deliver, not to learn." And I will always remember that. As we were going through this process, Sean had to keep investors on side, interested in the story, poor markets, major M&A deals, while we stuck to our boring knitting and strategy. It would only be a matter of time. Thank God we had the support of Jim Nasso, our chairman, to keep the board on side as well. We were looking for early-stage projects with upside potential. Sounds very easy, but hard to do. We were late to the party in Nevada, just in time in Mexico, early in Finland, and at the beginning in Nunavut. The floodgates opened. We expanded LaRonde, built Goldex, Lapa, Pinos Altos, Kittilä, Meadowbank from 2004 to 2010. We grew from 600 employees to over 6,000. In retrospect, sheer madness, fully supported by Sean and Jim. Quantum leap in the company. Looking back, the right move. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Jim. It was during this period that we met Tim Haldane, who led the charge in Chihuahua, Igmar Haga, John Todd, Peter Tapatai in Nunavut. Igmar, Tim, Peter, take your bow. We had met them during our early stage evaluations and relationships developed. They were instrumental in helping us understand their local constituency, showed me the local color, and everyone knows I love local color. Characters, decision makers, ice bars in Finland, taco joints in Chihuahua, and people's home. Thank you for all of your support and buying into the story. If I had 4 takeaways or memories etched in my brain from each location, it would be the following. I think starting with Mexico, Mark Legault and I were there. We were in an SUV, and we were surrounded by 5 individuals pointing rifles at us. Fortunately, they were looking for drug dealers, and our host convinced them that we were representatives of a Canadian mining company. We were looking for real gold, not Panama gold. There is something to be said about political stability. This was offset by our employees walking through Kawasoari, proudly wearing Agnico Pinos Altos colors, hauling marijuana 1 year, operating $1 million jumbo 2 years later. At Kittilä, the mayor gave a presentation to our Inuit guests on the impact of mining. It had only been 7 years. She mentioned that the population had started to grow again. Our young were staying, and even coming back after the construction of the Kittilä mine. Listening in on a conversation between a Sami Laplander and a Baker Lake Inuit, They compared notes on how they butchered a reindeer versus a caribou. Priceless. At Meadowbank, the first mine built on Inuit-owned lands. When we opened the first bridge on the road to Meadowbank, the elders dressed in their attire led their way across the bridge and into the future. The symbolism of that moment was incredible. No bureaucracy could ever stop that. Also, the first gold pour at Meadowbank on the eve before Sid scored the gold medal winning goal at the Vancouver 2010 Olympics, another MasterCard moment. And finally, back in the Abitibi where it all started, October 2011. We had just announced that we were ceasing production at Goldex immediately due to safety concerns with the crown pillar. We needed time to figure out the issues and see whether they were resolvable. We kept our employees, relocated them, cut projects. I walked into a joint management employee collaboration committee meeting in existence for over 25 years. It met on an annual basis to review salaries, benefits, problems, issues, etc. I informed them of our decision based on safety, relocate jobs, contractor reductions. They, in return, asked if the employees could caucus alone, which they did. Upon reconvening, they came back and said, "You've done enough. Discussions are over. We don't want anything. We have work to do." Josh Dallaire was a member of that committee. He's here tonight. Take a bow, Josh. As a result, Goldex came back as well after facing the wrath of our shareholders and a class action suit. I reserved the biggest thanks for last for my family. 3 children, Carrie, Adam, and Andrew, all born in mining communities. They have all grown up to do well and make us proud. Mining is tough, but it's also tough on families. Long hours, travel, and often a very grouchy dad. Memories of heading to the Laurent mine site, harvesting our Christmas trees with a thermos of hot chocolate, and our family retriever, Chelsea. They have seen and experienced it all. The good, the bad, the tears, the sadness, the laughter. As a result, we are closer and tighter than ever before. Love them dearly, love the 3 grandkids, Mia, Audrey, and Evan, so much, and thank them so much for their understanding and patience. Take a bow, kids. Come on. You're right here. And I've saved the best for last, my wife, Linda. We were high school sweethearts, together for 52 years. She's my best friend, soulmate, and the glue that held it all together. She was there when I got on the midnight bus and headed off to university in Montreal. Teenagers. We didn't know how that would work up. We grew up together, got married, had a family, went wherever this crazy industry took us. She kept the home fires burning. She also didn't know the meaning of the word no, open to any adventure at any time. She came underground with me and climbed raised ladders. She was there when I had my heart attack shortly after retiring after my 60th birthday. We sat in a dim room, me wired for sound. And you don't know what comes to your mind first. And one of the first things we said, well, I guess we're going to miss Jean Robitaille's 50th birthday party tomorrow. And we did. We missed it. We also asked ourselves, what's next? Is that all there is? Was it worth it? That was 8 years ago. And the moral of this story is well known. What doesn't kill you makes you strong. She's my #1 groupie whenever our little rock band, the Retros, play. She is here tonight. It was more than worth it. I wouldn't be here tonight with all of your understanding, love, hard work, and spirit. And the best is, we're not done yet. So the best is yet to come. So take a bow, Len. So I've come to the end. So thank you. Merci. gracias, kitos, matna, and to all a good night.
Here we are at the end of the evening, but before we head off to the after party, which is in the VIP room out those doors, we'd like to once again give a hearty thank you to our sponsors. And yes, please. Yes. And then also a thank you to the many organizations that make this show possible, which we're going to show up on the screen behind us. And finally, our biggest thanks is to each and every one of you for joining us for the Canadian Mining Hall of Fame's 32nd annual induction ceremony. As you enjoy the rest of the evening and embark on what we hope is a fruitful year for you, please always consider this one simple question: who has had an extraordinary career in Canadian mining? Find the person you deem to be an extraordinary leader and please nominate them. Thank you very much and good night.
We'd like to acknowledge our sustaining sponsors. It is with their support we maintain our enduring presence within the Canadian mining industry. We'd like to thank all our sponsors for their generous contributions to the success of this year's Canadian Mining Hall of Fame annual dinner and induction ceremony. Thank you.